We'll start with the dilemma that faces many new inventors and new technologies. It helps them, prevents them from getting out of that laboratory and out into the real world. And how can we tackle that problem or that dilemma? We'll then talk a little bit about how TechScale Solutions came to be, the process that we use to work with our clients as they develop their technology. I'll also talk about 3 case studies to show how this is actually applied in some real-world situations, and then wrap up with some areas that you can actually take back with you and hopefully use in your own product development. It's exciting times here in the world of renewable energy, and we see it all around this exhibition. There's been much progress in wind and solar energy, and now we're starting to see hydrogen really start to gain traction in the market. It's very exciting because hydrogen can help to close some of the gaps that we're missing in the renewable energy field. We have, of course, the Paris Climate Agreement that was signed with the idea of trying to control the climate change, and hydrogen can play a big role in that area. And that was identified in the Linz Hydrogen Declaration back last fall, where it was recognized that hydrogen is not just for industrial uses, it can be used for transportation, it can also be used for other heating and other applications, as well as storage. It's another very important area of hydrogen's benefit. The electric grid has been a good example for renewable energy. As we get the energy storage in place, that has really become very well organized and starting to come together. We see on the transportation side, of course, we've got electric vehicles, but we're starting to see a lot more traction with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We have a little bit in the United States where I'm from, mostly on the west coast of California, but I'm very encouraged as I come here to Europe and see some of the progress being made here in deploying fuel cell vehicles, as well as throughout Asia as well. In all these cases, we see these new technologies, they're making great progress, they're doing what they need to do, and there's new innovations every day. And really the big key is to get those innovations into the world and get them to actually make a difference so we can continue this clean energy revolution. The trouble, though, is there's a myriad of challenges that face a new inventor. You might have a new idea, but you need to think about how do you define the product requirements? What does the customer need? How do you scale up the output? How do you reduce the cost? And lastly, how do you manufacture this particular device? It's easier to fall into a trap of just continuous iteration where you're always trying to improve, but you never actually get it out into the real world. The process is not always straightforward. You could try to think of it as a marathon where you just got to run real hard for a long time and try to hit the finish line, but in reality, it's more like an obstacle course. Where in an obstacle course, you run into roadblocks, you run into barriers, you might have to go around, you might have to change paths and be very flexible. So that's a much better description of this type of process. And really, at the end of the day, you've just got to have the flexibility and be agile so you can reach that finish line. So let me step back and just tell you briefly about how TechScale Solutions came to be. It was started 5 years ago in 2014. I had worked with UTC fuel cells, UTC Power, for about 10 years as an engineering manager working on PEM fuel cells for heavy bus applications as well as automotive applications, and phosphoric acid fuel cells for stationary applications. And also at a small company called Hy9 Corporation where we were focused on hydrogen purification. In both cases, we had very good technology, made great progress, but the trouble was it was always limited demonstration fleets that never got into any kind of high volume manufacturing or any kind of high volume production. So I saw a need to combine the best of both worlds, if you will. We had a large company such as United Technology that had very good processes for doing product development and ensuring they got into the market correctly. On the flip side, the small company that I was working with was very fast and agile and could get things done very quickly, but not always good with the details of actually following up and understanding the full design process. So when I started TechScale Solutions, my goal was to combine those two things, to help companies have enough structure to do their product development, but not so much structure and bureaucracy that slows the development down. So that's kind of what we do. I initially thought of applying this to a wide range of different types of technologies, different types of industries, but my background is in fuel cells and hydrogen and electrolyzers and energy storage, and I'm very passionate about seeing these areas succeed. And for the past 5 years, I've been solely focused in this area and having great success helping companies move out of that laboratory situation into actual commercial products. We leverage a wide network of resources. We're a very small company, but what we can do is we can bring in the talent needed for different parts of a project. So for example, if you need some design engineering help or you need some controls work, we can bring people in on an as-needed basis to keep the overhead low, and you're only using what you need to do that part of the development. We can fully embed as part of the client team. So not only are we advising you and telling you what to do, but we're sitting there with you every day and actually working through the process. So we're vested in seeing you succeed. It's not just giving you advice and then walking away and seeing what happens. In this rest of this presentation, I'll focus on the technical and the operational aspects of the product development. There's obviously many other areas of finance and legal and regulations, which is beyond the scope today, so we won't be touching on those. So let me take a moment and talk a little bit about our process. We start with the prototype. That's where you all come in. You have great ideas. I always joke that I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't have the new invention, but I'm the guy who can help to bring it to the next stage. So I rely on you folks to be the ones bringing these great ideas in. We work with you to define what that product needs to do in the product definition phase. So in this particular case, we'll talk with you to understand what the technology is capable of. We'll talk with customers to understand what they want. We'll talk with people that have to manufacture this device. And then we put that all together, and there's a lot of back and forth and give and take to come up with a product that does what the customer needs, but also can leverage the technology. We put together these product requirements, and those really lock in the team, because it's important that the team has the ability to focus on one product, not trying to do 10 different things or continually iterating. Engineers and scientists are great at continuous improvement, trying to tweak a process and make it a little bit better, but sometimes you need to draw a line in the sand and say, this is good enough for now, this will be our first generation product, and we want to get it out into the real world. You get a lot of feedback, and once you get that feedback, that can go into your generation 2 and future products. The cost reduction side is obviously very important as well. We look at value engineering, which is simply looking at the form and the function of the various parts. Can we remove parts? Can we simplify designs? How does this thing get put together? Is it something that requires a lot of complex manufacturing, or can it be very easily assembled by a range of suppliers? As we look at the suppliers, we identify key suppliers. Some are off-the-shelf components that could be easily specified and sourced. Others require a much closer relationship with the supplier, maybe to customize. It could be a membrane or an electrode or a carbon component that needs a little bit more customization, so you'll need to work a little more closely with them. And as we get past that point of we've made the product, we've got the supply chain in place, as we launch the product, we want to make sure we have the proper documentation and technical support in place, because the last thing you want to do is put a product out in the field and lose track of what all the different variants are in there, and a customer calls you with a problem. You want to be able to respond to that customer very quickly, know exactly where to go, how to fix it, and make that customer happy. So by having all that in place and having that technical team ready to respond helps you to turn that around very quickly and keep the customer very happy with that. So now what I'll do is I'm going to show 3 case studies that actually exhibit these different parts of the process and how they can be applied to a range of companies that are both mature, large companies and startup, small companies. And I just want to note that in the interest of the non-disclosure agreements I have with my clients, I won't be disclosing their names or any proprietary information, but I think you'll find that this is very illustrative of the process, and you'll see how this can be applied in several different cases. The first case was a very small startup company that had a unique way of making hydrogen from a natural gas. They were doing it literally in a test tube, very small type of scale application. And they wanted to see if they could use this in a home refueling situation to make hydrogen, or perhaps in a telecom backup application to feed a fuel cell. So they brought us in, and we really just focused on the 2 first steps in this process. We sat down and said, okay, what is this product capable of? What does the customer need to do? And through a long, not very long, but through a discussion, we got to the point where we decided it made the most sense to look at this telecom backup application. So we kind of understood what the competition had out there and what our price points needed to be. So then my next question was, okay, now how do we scale this up? And we talked about it, we did the math, looked at the efficiencies, and quickly understood that while it was technically feasible, it made absolutely no sense to scale up this technology. This is something they've been working on a very long time. They were very passionate about it, but it just didn't make sense to apply it in this particular situation. So as we did that, what we did is we came back and said, here's a different technology over here that might be more applicable to what you need. So they made a pivot, they reorganized some of their efforts, and then they moved forward with that new technology to be able to actually use that in this particular application for a telecom backup hydrogen generator. So the key things, kind of as a takeaway from this lesson here, is you want to evaluate those product requirements early. Inventors always have blinders, and they're always so passionate about their technology, but sometimes somebody from outside has to come in and tell them that maybe this isn't the right fit. Maybe they can use it someplace else, but today it's not ready or it's not in the right spot. So it's a hard conversation, but it's important because it can save a lot of time and a lot of money if you find that out early. And it's just not trying to force fit those types of situations if you can at all avoid that. The second case was a slightly more mature company. They had a product that they had built basically one-off. And what this was a electrochemical hydrogen compression system. So it would separate hydrogen and compress it electrochemically. So the idea is you could have a gas that had other components within it. You just purify it with the hydrogen and have high pressure hydrogen at the outlet. And that was used for laboratory gas generation. This case, we started out with the same type of product definition. We looked at cost reduction. We actually embedded directly with the team in this particular case. And this was important because we wanted to keep the team on focus. It was a fairly new team, didn't have a lot of oversight experience, so we actually acted as really an engineering manager, if you will, laying out the programs, laying out the resources, and figuring out the path we would follow. Many times we had to use contingency plans. We'd bring multiple paths forward because as fast as we were implementing this technology, there was new technology being developed, and we didn't always have the test data, so we'd have to decide, do we take a chance with the new material, or do we fall back on something that we already know? So those decisions kind of get made real time along the way. But what we did do is we followed a very formalized design process. So we understood what it took to put this together. We developed the designs, we developed the bill of materials. The safety analysis, of course, is a very important piece of this as well. We wanted to make sure it was a safe product. And we worked with contract manufacturers to really look at how do we make this. Many times in this type of industry where you're building stacks and fuel cells, a lot of companies like to keep the stack development internal. That's kind of their secret sauce, that's what they like to do. But there's so many good companies out there that can assemble cabinets, put in plumbing and piping and other balance of plants components. So we look at utilizing those. So after talking to those contract manufacturers, we understood there's kind of a break point. It didn't make sense for unit number 1 to be done at a contract manufacturer. Maybe unit number 5 or unit number 10. So we actually built the first few units internal at this company using technicians, and of course it's going to be more expensive doing it that way, but it gets you started. Then they can transition over to a contract manufacturer where they can actually scale up the production and keep up with the demand at that point. So the real takeaway from this situation is it's important to have those detailed project plans, have those contingencies in place, because you never know. We're jumped ahead, yeah. Sorry about this. You never know exactly where you're going to end up relative to that particular development program. So you want to have that plan in place and get the technology advanced, and look at using outside suppliers when you can, so you can leverage your own resources. So the last case study we'll look at here is a large energy storage company, a very mature company, had developed the technology as a cell stack, but just at a few cells. They need to get up to megawatt scale, so now we're getting into very large stacks and multiple stacks with multiple systems. They were experts in developing the electrolyte that went into the system. They were chemists, but they didn't have the experience for the broader equipment that all has to surround this system. So our role is, as I came in, we looked at organizing the group within the right areas. Let the folks that are experts in the electrochemical side do what they're good at. We brought in external design engineers where we could to try to augment the team, because we didn't need to hire a bunch of mechanical engineers for developing a cabinet and enclosure and some of the plumbing runs. We could bring in people on a contract basis, get that work done, and then move forward and then not have them as overhead. Again, we had the detailed project plans. We looked at make and buy decisions. Some things were done internally. There was other things. In this case, we did use a contract manufacturer where they would build sub-assemblies and bring it in for us to assemble. We had the documentation in place because, again, as this gets out into the real world, you want to make sure the documentation is there so you can support it. And ultimately, the systems were built and tested at full scale, and then they're still continuing to go out today. So it's a very successful transition for that company to go from a small startup, even though they're part of a bigger company, to actually have a product. So again, we look for those detailed project plans. Budgets, we didn't talk a lot about that, but that's obviously a reality in the world. Everyone has to worry about what it costs to do this, and the time, of course, is very important. So as we put these project plans together, we work through all those details. So what I'd like to leave you with now that we've looked at these 3 cases is kind of the takeaways, the keys to success that you can use going forward as you develop your technology. Every case is slightly different, but I think these are some 4 areas that can be applied almost universally. First one is that product definition. Take the time, establish those clear product requirements up front. It keeps your team focused, it lets the customers know what to expect, it keeps everybody on the same page. Evaluate the commercial viability. You want to make sure there's a market and you're working in the right space to achieve that market. And wherever possible, especially in a small company, it's helpful to focus on a single product. Get that first product out the door, get it working. You're going to learn a lot when it goes in the field. As you start to get that feedback, you'll then be able to build onto more functionality in your products or even new products, but start with one. Cost reduction is always very important. By following a rigorous design process, it's very clear what everyone is working on and also understanding what the components are that can be removed to reduce cost. Leverage those external resources wherever you can. Use the contract engineers if you can in certain areas and have a core staff that's really the heartbeat of your technology. And finally, lock in that design. Once that design is locked, everyone moves forward and starts to work on the design and the actual build of this product. We're not continually changing. The manufacturing and supply strategy is kind of the third area. Think about what you're going to make, what you're going to buy, what kind of investment you want to make in manufacturing versus what you want to leverage through contract manufacturers. Collaborate with your manufacturers. Oftentimes, they're building things already. You know, in the fuel cell and hydrogen world, we think we're building a cabinet for the first time, but there's lots of companies that build cabinets, there's lots of companies that build standard things, and they can show us ways of doing things much more quickly so we don't have to reinvent the wheel on things that have already been done before. And develop that plan for scale up. It might be, you know, building it in your garage initially, but then it could be building it in a high volume contract manufacturer, and it could even be building your own factory. So kind of understand where those breakpoints are. And lastly, you want to look at the product launch and support and make sure you have that documentation in place and you've got the technical resources in place. So when there is a problem, you can react to it quickly, understand the problem, and respond in such a way that the customer is as seamless as possible and is really able to have a good positive experience with your product. So that completes my talk for now. I appreciate your attention. I think now you're ready to start turning your prototypes into products. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, George Roberts. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, then let me have the first one. Sure. I mean, especially the first case was like, I've heard about kill your baby. So this is the classic.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly what it is. So can you maybe say a little bit about the time frame? Usually, how long do you work with the companies? Of course, it varies a lot, but
yeah, as far as the time frame and how long we work with companies, it's highly variable. So this company that we talked about in the first case, this was less than 6 months. So in the first month or so, we quickly realized this was not where we wanted to focus this technology. We were able to move into this different direction. In 6 months, had them up and running. The large electrochemical company we talked about, we've been working with them for 3.5 years now on a part-time basis. So we're not there all the time, but just trying to augment the team and help them move along. So it does vary by client and by need. And what we try to do is be there as much as we need to be, but no more than we need to be there, because certainly you only want to minimize all those costs of the development if you can.
Thank you very much. Further questions from the audience by now? Okay, then maybe I have a last one.
Sure, you may.
You're in the you are US based. How about your clients? They also have to be kind of close by, or how is it at the moment?
Right, so I am based in the US. We're based in Connecticut, which is on the east coast of the United States near New York City. Most of our clients are in North America. Part of the reason we're here at Hanover is to reach out to the larger world here of the hydrogen and fuel cells and electrolysis type of companies, because quite frankly, there's a lot of activity going on over here. It's very exciting to see, and I think there's a lot we can offer. So we definitely want to be able to help out here. We're able to travel here as necessary. It doesn't have to be just a phone call. It can actually be an in-person, on-site type of situation, because it is important to have that direct relationship, and we're actually invested in your success as well.
Thank you very much. So if you want to discuss the topic any further, please go to the booth C731 in this direction. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.